feel a little at a disadvantage with no props today. Everyone else has them. Let's pause for a word of prayer together. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth, the meditations of all our hearts, be strengthening and pleasing to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Leaning into hope is the sermon title. Hope is sometimes looked at as kind of an abstract word. It's a hard word to kind of get teeth around that word. It seems a little bit kind of trying to reach for it and grab it, kind of hard to get a hold of what hope really is. Oftentimes people think of it as an idea or a dream or a hope or a wish or something that might come to fruition in some case. And so for most people, hopes generate up in people's minds and it stays there. And we try to hope for something. We want something to happen. We want something that's different than our current state of being. The reason we have hope is that our current situation isn't what we want it to be. We want something other than our current state of affairs, whether it's for me, a family, a church, a community, a country, a world. We hope because we want things to be more flourishing, better, thriving than what we currently experience. The source of our hope, which we hope is God in most things, is where our source of hope of God comes from. Andrew Lester says that many people make the mistake that hope is, in terms of us getting to our future, where we want it to be, that God is behind us, pushing us to our future. He said that's really not where God is in our quest for hope, that God is actually out in front in the future, reaching from the future back to the present, pulling us into the desired future that we want. So the perspective of where we find God is God's not in the past, hoping that the future is going to be different. God is in the future, pulling us to that particular possible outcome in our life. Now, Cornelius, who was talked about by Susan in chapter 10 of Acts, was an individual that was considered a God-fearer. Basically was a person that believed in God but was not Jewish. And Cornelius and his household and his friends had this desire to want to be connected to this Jesus person that had been on the earth. They wanted to know about his life, his influence, his teachings, his love, his inclusion, all those things. And Cornelius wanted to hear a message from one of the followers of Jesus. Now, Peter at first really didn't want to go because how could Gentiles hear a message from Jewish people that would even matter to them? And Peter ends up having a series of dreams, and through those dreams becomes open to preaching to people other than his own community. And about that time, Cornelius' delegation makes their way up to Peter and says, we would like you to come and spend some time at our house. We are eager to hear the news that you proclaim day in and day out. And Peter goes, he preaches his message, and something miraculous happens in that. Something that Peter didn't expect, and I'm guessing Cornelius and his family and friends didn't expect the outcome they got either, of what happens when there is a moment of clarity in your life. When you feel something, experience something, and then you feel convicted, this is how I want my life to be. This is how I want other people's lives to be. And Cornelius goes through, in his household, goes through this transformation of change, and I would dare say that Peter went through a transformation himself in that experience. It all started with Cornelius dreaming and imagining something that happened that didn't seem like it was possible to happen, that the forces against him were too great for that to even be a possibility. Now, Donald Capps, who is an author of Hope and writes about pastoral care and theology, talks about threats and allies to hope. Things that prevent us from hope being a real thing for us and those that help us bring hope to reality. The three threats that he talks about, one is he talks about despair. Is that when there is an onslaught of negativity and it keeps coming and it keeps coming, you kind of despair and think, well, there's nothing to hope for because there's no way to overcome all the stuff that's coming at me that feels negative or harmful or unjust in some way. And we are seeing that in our current reality, and that we keep seeing negative forces at such volumes. I feel like in our political world, there is such a hose of negativity shooting at us. They're like, how in the world can I overcome the pressure of all this stuff coming? Is there any possibility? And we end up despairing. And with that, the other threat paired with despair is apathy. The idea that we are thrust with so much negativity and injustice that our response becomes no response at all. And those that have power and privilege want you to feel as though there is no hope possible. I guess I have to succumb to whatever the circumstances are. I just have to live with them. And then the other threat of hope is shame. When we've imagined something different and it doesn't come to fruition, we feel shameful that we were never a part of actually doing anything that made life better for ourselves or other people. So those are the threats: despair and apathy and shame. And they can be pretty powerful forces that drive us to places of not acting or living out our hopes. But we have hope that there are allies to hope that help us get to where we want to go. One is trust. That we trust in other people, that we're not alone in the process. One of the things that power and privilege does, it makes you feel like you're alone, that nobody else has the same kind of unjust feelings that I do. Trust, on the other hand, is knowing that we have companions along the way. We have partners, family, friends, church members, people in the community, that we can trust one another, that we are all bound together with one another to do this work. The other piece, of the other ally of hope, is patience. We are in a quick fix, immediate information age. And if it doesn't happen right now, if it doesn't get solved right now, we feel like something's wrong. And in the world of hope, we have to allow patience to be a part of our journey of seeing things unfold in helpful and hopeful ways in the days to come. The third piece, I would say, and the third ally that Capps talks about, is humility. That whatever we're hoping for, whatever we're desiring for ourselves in the world, is bigger than me, is bigger than the outcomes for me. It's not a selfish hope. The hope is bigger than me. I'm a part of something bigger than just enough income, enough resources. We want that maybe for me and for other people too. Humility is recognizing I'm a part of the journey of hope, but I'm not the reason for hoping in the end. Now, in the Star Wars universe, there is a few characters in that universe that feel as though hope is an untenable thing or maybe far-reaching in some way. And one is the main character, Luke Skywalker. When we first encounter him in the first movie, he is working with his aunt and his uncle on the island or the planet of Tatooine. And he is relegated. He wants to be a part of the rebellion, but he's loyal to his family to work on the farm in Tatooine and to do what he needs to do, and that his time will eventually come. But he kind of thinks, my time is passing. Maybe I'll never get to do this. And then these droids come into his possession. One of the droids decides to run off and look for Obi-Wan Kenobi. And when Luke gets in contact with Obi-Wan Kenobi in the film, Obi-Wan Kenobi encourages him, you should go on this journey with me to help this princess. He goes, I'm not going on this journey with you. I've got people back home. I've got tasks to do. I've got things to accomplish. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, that's your uncle talking. That's not you talking from your heart. There is something deeper inside of you that you want to let out, but you're not letting it out. And Luke decides not to go on the journey. And on their way back, as Luke is maybe going to drop them off and head home, they come across a vehicle that housed a bunch of little figures called Jawas. And they had been killed by stormtroopers. And Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi realize these stormtroopers are looking for the droids in their possession. And if the droids hurt and injured the Jawas, they might go back to the person that bought the droids in the first place, which was his aunt and uncle. He goes back in his land speeder, heads back to his home, and he finds his aunt and uncle have been killed by stormtroopers. To me, it was at that moment when Luke's conviction of I've got a hope out there, I've got this wish, I've got this idea. It went from idea and wish to something concrete and specific and action-driven. He comes back and says, I'm in. Let's go. I want to be a part of this. I mean, he has a lot of energy to do that. He has maybe a little bit of naivete in that, but he has conviction that overrides the naive feelings, and he can learn along the way and bolster who he is on behalf of others as he lives out his own sense of loss. He can help bring hope to himself and others along the way. I don't know about you, but There's moments in my life when I get convicted like Luke did in that film. And I can actually point to the day and the time that happened to me. Now, in January 26th of 1996, I was ordained into ministry. So next January, I will celebrate 30 years of ordained ministry. And I've seen a lot of things, encountered a lot of things in that time period. But I will tell you that May 25th of 2020 was a game changer for me. If you don't know that date, it's a week after I started here. And I thought the biggest challenge was going to be COVID. But a week after I started on May 18th, a week later on the 25th, I'm watching the TV, and for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I saw a police officer put his knee on George Floyd's neck. And George is gasping. He said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And we end up witnessing a murder on TV. In that moment, I was convicted in a way that I've not been convicted in my life. My life changed. I participated in some justice things here and some justice things there. I'd dip my toe in the water here and dip my toe in the water over there. But it radically changed my inner world in terms of what am I doing in terms of justice work in the world. When I recognized the amount of injustice and the systemic pain that we were encountering as a country in that moment, I no longer wanted to sit back and be a bystander. There was a person that said, when you see wrong happening in the world, you can do one of two things. You can do nothing, or you can do something. And the do something was not just a performative, I'll help a little bit here, I'll help a little bit here, when you're really not helping at all. I remember members of this church said, we'd like to help out with some of the demonstrations that are happening down near the plaza. And my first gutter response was, I wanted to help. I didn't want to help, and then it's go back to normal living again. I said, if we go back and if we help, we're in this for the long haul when it comes to racial justice. We have a racial justice team that is constantly discerning and thinking about ways that we can engage as a congregation, learning for ourselves, engaging the world. We have 3 words that shape our work in this congregation: education, relationships, and advocacy. Any kind of justice we want to do, we educate ourselves about those things. We do not leave it upon those that are feeling unjust to teach us how it is they are unjust. It's our job to educate ourselves about the things that we need to do in the world, matters of justice and equity in the world. The second part is recognizing its relationships. It's not like primarily white people saying, we got the answers for everybody else. We don't. There have been people in this justice work for a long time, and we occasionally get convicted and think we've got the answers when we are simply partners in the journey. And so for 5 years, we've been creating partnership and relationships across this community. We have a wonderful biracial ministry with Second Baptist Church of Olathe every month, helping those that are food insecure. We've developed relationships with all kind of community organizing groups, knowing that they've been doing that work for years already. We don't have some unique wisdom, but we do have conviction and power and energy and passion to join that work. And the third piece is advocacy, is moving hope from an idea to action. When hope becomes idea to action, it becomes real for us. When I go to a street corner and hold up a sign that says Black Lives Matter, refugees are welcome here, LGBTQ love is love on a sign, on a street corner, that's hope in action. We have members of this congregation that are part of Grandparents for Gun Safety. And occasionally you'll find them at various places in the community, and they're handing out gun locks, because most of the gun violence and gun deaths happen in people's homes with their own guns, and they're not safe and protected. And every time a gun lock is passed out to another household and saves a life, that is hope in action. We have groups of people about every 3 or 4 months volunteer for Habitat for Humanity. Sometimes they're nailing boards together. Sometimes they're painting the side of a house. Sometimes they're doing some landscaping. Sometimes they're putting trusses up on the roof. But every time they are helping build that house, they're providing affordable housing for a family that otherwise wouldn't get it. They are putting hope into action. Every time we set foot at a Pride event or at one of the Pride booths, we're not there to convince them that church is the answer. We're there simply to say that we love you, we see you, and you are an important part of this community. There's enough spiritual trauma that it's hard for people in that community to want to trust church anymore, so we're just going to simply show up and be present for people. That's putting hope into action. Cornelius felt it the moment Peter preached. He thought he knew what this message was going to be, but as soon as he felt it, he said, "What hinders me from being baptized?" We want to be baptized right now, and I'm sure Peter and his Jewish delegation that showed up, like, "I'm not sure about this, but how can we refute what just happened in this moment?" And Cornelius and his household and his friends were baptized and welcomed in. Cornelius had this opportunity, he had this hope of maybe I could be included. Maybe I could hear this message. Maybe if I just heard it, something special would happen. And it did beyond his own imaginations. That proclaiming of Peter's message to him was hope and action of if you dream and imagine something and actually work to make it happen, change can happen in your life. There are all kinds of characters in Star Wars that bring hope into action. I think of Luke Skywalker, I've mentioned him. I think of Rey in the last 3 films. She was kind of solo on her planet of Jakku and wanted to stay there because she wanted her parents to come back. And it wasn't until Finn and BB-8 come into play that she realized there's a larger thing that I can be a part of and join in and help out with. I think of Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi and Princess Leia and all these characters that enacted hope into action and brought about change against an empire or a first order that seemed too large, too big to overcome. Chuck mentioned in his sermon last week one of the ending pieces where Poe is fighting against, they're at Exegol and they're fighting against all these evil ships that are happening at the end of the film, and they're battling and it doesn't look like they're going to win, and he apologizes to the other pilots and saying, I thought we could do it, but there's just too many of them. We're not going to make it. And Lando Calrissian says, but there are more of us than there are of them, and looks back and there's all the sea of ships that are back there ready to overcome the evil that's there. And you can even find hope and action in a droid, in a bunch of wires and metal. In the last film, they have to get this inscription from a Sith sword or a Sith knife. And C-3PO is the only one that can interpret that Sith message on that blade. And they take C-3PO to Babu Frick, who's going to reprogram him. And the idea is that when they reprogram, he will lose all memory and all data up, and he's totally kind of a restart. And so C-3PO is about to lose everything he knows in that moment. And he agrees to go through the procedure for the larger cause. And there's this silence as C-3PO has these wires about ready to be transformed and wiped clean of his knowledge so this Sith message can be communicated. And there's this silence. And Poe says, "You okay there, C-3PO?" "Yes, I'm just taking one last look at my friends." And it was just this great, I never thought a droid would make me cry. But this droid, C-3PO gets it. Hope is about humility. It's about this bigger cause, about being a part of something grander and greater in the world. This hope in action, we think it's this ethereal, distant, kind of pipe dream thing, but we put it hands and teeth to hope, it makes a difference. In 1994, I made my first kind of significant trip out of the United States and went to Italy. And we were studying Christian art and architecture. And in the city of Rome, we visited one of the catacombs, which are the early burial sites of the early Christians. Went down to the catacombs. It's dark. There's a few lights, but it's mostly dark. And our leader brought us to this one grave site. And most grave sites are either open with some bones still exposed, but of the ones that are still sealed, they're either sealed with fresco art or carved marble with engravings on the marble. And we went down to the catacombs. We got to this one site, And the professor said, I want everyone to shine their lights on this gravesite. So we shine all our flashlights so we could see it was a marble inscribed gravesite. And I started looking at the letters on the gravesite of like, why would he bring us to this place? Why this particular gravesite? So we look at the gravesite and we can see the letters and we can make out who's behind that marble stone. It's Cornelius. And I had this little moment of thinking, I put my hand on that marble engraving, and it felt like I was touching history. And I got to thinking, if Cornelius hadn't had a hope of including Gentile people, I wouldn't have had my hand on that marble stone at that moment. Cornelius' hope about a future that was way beyond his own life made my own Christian life possible. Whether it's through Star Wars or Cornelius' story, or your own journey of finding a sense of conviction and passion about your life, leaning into hope is knowing there's trust and patience and humility along the way. That, my friends, is how we lean into hope as people of faith.